I am privileged to welcome Ronan Farrow, Director of the Office for Global Youth Issues at the U.S. Department of State, as today's commencement speaker.
Thank you for that introduction, President Marcy. Thank you to Chair Galding and all the members of the board. And I want to especially thank all of the students that are here today. Congratulations. It's appropriate to be here in the Bay Area, near the beating heart of so much of America's innovation and creative thinking, near the birthplace of Think Different. And I'm reminded so often of how rare and precious different thinking is. I remember on the flight over just yesterday, I sat next to an older lady named Judith. I was working on some high-level State Department business. Okay, I was tweeting. When the flight attendant came by to say, in that tone that flight attendants clearly learn at some specialized flight attendant school, sir, we're gonna need you to shut off that phone. And like any red-blooded American, I of course pretended to turn it off and then kept typing. This isn't Soviet Russia. That rule makes absolutely no sense. If electronics were dangerous, Al-Qaeda would just send people out with iPads and personal shavers. But this displeased my seatmate Judith greatly. They told us to turn that off, she said. I ignored her. She tapped me on the shoulder to get my attention and pointed to the offending device. I asked why she felt so strongly about enforcing the rule. She said she hadn't followed any of the literature I told her about on there being no reason to turn off phones on planes. I countered that this rule had been abandoned in other parts of the world, that it was dumb nonsense, that if it were dangerous during takeoff and landing, surely we wouldn't be able to use the phones while we were hurtling through the air at 30,000 feet. I'm sorry, I just feel passionate about this. Judith told me, I don't need explanations, it's a rule. My generation followed those. She shook her head. Not like you young people. I peered at Judith and wondered if she remembered the civil rights movement, Vietnam, if she was really well preserved, maybe even women's suffrage. But Judith is right. Young people stand for a specific set of qualities. We're impatient, we're unfocused, we take risks, we are brash, we're disobedient. Sometimes we act like the rules don't apply to us because we can be, let's face it, a little self-absorbed. Hold on, I need to Instagram a picture of myself talking about how self-absorbed we are. But today, I want to take a moment to talk about why those youthful qualities are in fact our great strengths. Why your rule-breaking, risk-taking, disobedient selves are exactly what we need for all of our world's challenges, and exactly what you need as you embark on this next step of your journey. Aristotle wrote more than 2,300 years ago that, quote, "The young are heated by nature as drunken men by wine." Only recently have we understood how true this is. Imaging studies of the young brain show that it undergoes a massive reorganization between ages 12 and 25. That faint buzzing you hear isn't mic feedback, it's your brains rewiring themselves. These physical changes move in a wave from the brain's rear to its front, making our most heavily used synapses, the little chemical junctures across which axons and dendrites pass notes, stronger. At the same time, the synapses that we don't use gradually wither. That means in a few years, you'll become more focused, more risk-averse, more likely to follow familiar rules and patterns. Scientists once thought that the young brain, in all its recklessness, was a work of progress, an intermediary state. But recent neurological studies have cast a more flattering light on our recklessness. The current literature shows that the person under 25 is less a rough draft than a finely honed instrument, tailor-made for one of life's greatest periods of challenge, tumult, and change. The journey you are all embarking on now, entering the real world, finding your passions, laying the groundwork to build your families, is among the most important tests we undergo as a species. That's why evolution gave us our reckless brains. And the trailblazing qualities of youth provide us with an unmatched power to accept change, challenge norms, and adapt to all of those new environments that you're about to face. So Judith and your next boss, and indeed the world, may not like your youthful instincts, but they're the best tools you'll have at your disposal to build your future and a better future for all of us. That's exactly what we've seen young people do in recent years. One of the great privileges of my work has been to learn from young people living amidst extraordinary pressures and conflicts. In Sudan, with the UN, I spoke with teenagers in refugee camps and rebel-held areas across the Horn of Africa. I met people like Yahya, a child soldier who was 17, my own age at the time, when I met him. Yahya had been fighting with a rebel group, the Sudanese Liberation Army, since he was 13. He told me how early one morning he had been awakened by the sound of gunfire. Janjaweed, the government-backed militias that carried out a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign in Darfur, had surrounded his village, and on camels and horsebacks they swept through, killing men, raping women, and setting fire to homes. He was waving a Kalashnikov at the sky when I met him, decrying an opposing rebel faction. He told me, "This is the way I have to be heard. This is the way I have to end this conflict." But the exciting thing is, although I've heard that message echoed all around the world from young people who have taken arms up to make a difference, and I've realized that whatever the tools, our generation will find a way to make a difference. We now know that the tools are changing. We're seeing young people turning to peaceful methods of reform. We're seeing them make their voices heard in the blogosphere, on Facebook, on Twitter. Some of them even follow me on Twitter, and we like those people very, very much. I think of a young Tunisian I met, 21-year-old Hamada Ben Amour, when I think of the way in which revolutions can be not only powerful but also peaceful. Under the nom de rap El General, he recorded a song in his garage, Rais Le Bled, which meant Mr. President. It was addressed to then Tunisian President Ben Ali. He sang that the Tunisian people were living like dogs, drinking from a cup of suffering, how they were unable to work, and how their voices were not being heard. The song became an instant YouTube and Facebook hit, and an anthem for frustrated young Tunisians. It wasn't long before the secret police burst into El General's family home. They hauled him to a government facility where he spent 3 days in a solitary cell being interrogated. His captors demanded, "Who's behind you? Which party are you from?" But El General didn't belong to a political party. He wasn't writing his songs on behalf of an opposition leader. He represented a new political force, one that the police who interrogated him didn't yet understand: youth. El General and young men and women like him in every country in the world belong to a generation that more and more is shaping the political events of our time. Protests by young Tunisians sent a seismic wave racing across his region, from Tunisia to Cairo to Baghdad to Beirut, Sana'a to Tripoli. Young men and women who had been marginalized stood up and stood strong for their dignity, the opportunity to build their own futures, and the right to have a voice in their own governments. They marched, they chanted, they organized, and they have been tracked, arrested, beaten, even killed. Of course, young people were not alone in these experiences. Tahrir Square brought together people of all ages. So has our own Occupy Wall Street movement in the United States. Political expression isn't a young person's game. It's a fundamental human experience. But it is youthful qualities, a resistance to rules for their own sake, a fearlessness in challenging norms, a willingness to accept risk and uncertainty. Those same qualities that will carry you through this next period of change in your lives that have animated these changes around the world. And when I look out at this crowd, I'm excited because I see those same qualities on display right here on this campus. I think of people like Farah Mohsen, who fled conflict in Baghdad to come here, and who built an initiative to link Bay Area veterans and Iraqis for public service. Or Gabriel Navarrete, whose creative research on breast cancer has garnered national attention. Or Thea Noonan, who shouldered a full course load and a job as a caretaker for the elderly, and still found time to start up her own software development company. There are many here just like them, who don't wait to tackle the problems they see with drive, with creativity. And when that means a high likelihood of failure, you know to embrace the risk and carry forward anyway. Those ultimately are the qualities of youth that I hope I don't lose, and that I hope you won't either. So why does this all matter to you? First, because each and every one of us faces the same unforgiving future, and confronting it will take all of our original thinking and willingness to buck old norms. Young people have been hit harder by the economic crisis than almost any other demographic. The unemployment rate for young Americans averages twice the rate for all other workers. At last count, some 17% of Americans 16 to 24 are out of work. In the degree you receive today, you have a tremendous advantage in facing that moment of crisis. But the market you enter remains a bleak one. That means that many of you may have to build your own solutions. New startups created by entrepreneurs create a majority of new jobs. Many of the global brands, in fact, that started right here in California were just creative ideas from young people started on campuses like this one. Carrying forward that spirit of entrepreneurship means drawing on each of our so-called flaws. Let me touch on 3. First, sometimes it's your willingness to accept risk and uncertainty, and yes, at times our blissful ignorance of just how much can go wrong. That can turn our obstacles into opportunities. It's telling that more than half of all Fortune 500 companies were founded during recessions or bear markets, and that so many of the founders of those companies were young people, frustrated with economies just like this one. We may fail, but we have plenty of time to try again and again until we succeed. We may screw up, but we'll learn from our mistakes. We can piss people off, but sometimes that's what you have to do to shake things up. Second, don't be afraid to be impatient. The entrepreneurs whose ideas have driven the world's economy are those who refuse to wait for established businesses to come around to their thinking. The individuals driving youth to the forefront of the global stage are young activists who wouldn't wait for their rights to be honored. Finally, for those of you sitting here wondering what the hell your next phase of your life will be about, I see you there in the back, don't try to hide, man. Know that diversity can be among your greatest strengths. I remember when my sister Quincy was 5, she announced, "I want to be a doctor, a mermaid, a ballerina, and a man." She's still got some work to do on a few of those things. But that continues to be my philosophy. Don't ever feel boxed into a single career or pursuit. Remain curious. Explore every access on every front in the battle to make a difference. There are plenty of years for us to be stuck in our ways, to lose our elasticity, to grow soft and a little jaded. Hold it off as long as possible. Fight that sense of what can't happen, of accepting what's always been, what's broken, what's less than you can achieve, and less than this world can be. So own those qualities of youthful recklessness. They give us a power to achieve incredible things, whether in our careers, in public service, in our communities, or around the world. The fact is, you may not need to revolt against an oppressive dictatorial regime, unless you buy the whole Obama is a socialist thing. But every day, all of us, young and old, are challenged by limits, by expectations, boundaries, and bigotry. And confronting those forces will take a willingness on our part to make waves, break down old standards, and make some of our elders uncomfortable. And we better do it. We have to. Through no fault of our own, our generation inherits a set of challenges, from pandemic disease, to a changing climate, to a dependence on fossil fuels like oil, a world threatened by the spread of dangerous tools of destruction, and societies in every corner of our planet riven by religious and tribal divides. The bottom line is previous generations have failed to solve a lot of these problems, and in many cases, they've made them worse. And I think it's going to be young people like you and me that break through the stale thinking and old divisions that have prevented progress for so long. So I'm here to tell you to keep trailblazing, to keep taking risks, not just because you'll need to, but also because the world will need you to. That's true of young people in this country, And it's true of this country itself. It's often said that part of America's success has been the fact that we're a new nation, that we don't have a history, and so we're not bound by it, and that we have the audacity to believe that things can be different. So I hope that you'll carry forward that knowledge as you embark on this next journey. And while I'm not the oldest or wisest commencement speaker in the Bay Area today, I am armed with something, and you each are armed with something that will allow us to confront this moment of challenge and turmoil better than anyone. I hope you'll understand the power you have to change your lives and to change the world. Congratulations, class of 2012.